Hi, my name is David Camp, and you may remember me as the guy who did the People's Plenary at the TRHT in Carlsbad and also some subsequent polling through the course of the week. This short video is intended to share the results of some of the cross-tab data we did, as well as review some of the basic findings in order to help us all think about the implications potentially for the racial justice and racial reconciliation movement. So I'm just going to run through these quickly. As you may recall, about 16% of the participants were LGBT. I think that's probably higher than a portion of the population, and we can think about what that means. As we all remember that a much higher percentage of people at the conference had incomes over $100,000 or even $200,000 than in the general population. And we can think about if our particular group in our region is represented in this way, what are the ways we can leverage that connection and those kind of resources. Only about 5% of participants claimed an ideology that was right of center, so we have to think about who we're trying to reach and how we're trying to reach them, and do we need to expand our group, or how we deal with who we have in the tent already and to leverage what we can do. There was a polling question about the portion of white folks who thought that racism against white people was as big of a problem as people of color. It turns out that about 44% of us overestimated that. So it may be that the field of white allies is a little bit broader than we thought. There was a fair amount of optimism. About 44% of participants thought that racial attitudes were highly likely or likely to noticeably improve in 10 years. Whites were more optimistic about this question. The most frequently cited need for support other than money from the foundation was access to a network of practitioners and connections to others in the work. So clearly, this whole community of practice thing is something that we all need to pay some attention to. There were some interesting crosstabs that were uncovered just after we left Carlsbad. I'll just share a few of them briefly. One that would be nice to have known at the conference was that 28% of the people of color prioritized expanding their network in the second half of the conference compared to 9% of whites. So we can think about when we have our own convenings, if there's a similar dynamic going on, we might want to know that and structure our activities around that. 50% of the youngest group prioritized expanding their network during the second half of the conference compared to 15% of the middle-aged participants and 16% of older participants. So again, we can think about these implications if this would hold to be true in our region, whether we structure events to have that networking element if that's what people want. The LGBT folks were 27% of those under 35 and significantly less for those over 35. And also, the white participants were much more likely to be LGBT, 22% of the white participants versus 13% of the people of color. Again, this is something just to note, and we can think about if this is true in our region, we find this out, how do we reorient our tasks in light of that. 37% of participants under 36 said they were spiritually aware, not religious, compared to just 21% of those over 36 and to 56, and 90% of those over 57. And a similar finding about religion, 10% of the white participants were atheists compared to 1% of the people of color. So again, the point is not to change things dramatically around this, but it's important to know if we're creating events that have public prayer or don't have public prayer or call upon spiritual traditions or not, that there might be some differences between different groups in who that might resonate with or be a clunker for. 34% of people of color thought that racial attitudes were highly likely or likely to change in 10 years compared to a much greater 54% of whites. By contrast, a much greater percentage of people of color thought there was a good chance that their community would mount a serious TRHT effort within a year. 71% of people of color thought this, as opposed to 45% of whites. So optimism cuts a lot of different ways, and it is different by group. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to play that role at the foundation. I love doing that at race conferences, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye.